Barefoot Media presents The Fatal Frontier by Matt Vancil. Narrated by Brian S. Lewis. Chapter 1. Omnes nos Morituri. 40,000 kilometers above the planet, Webb tuned out the red-shirted crewmen buzzing about like panicked hummingbirds. She shimmied into her pressure suit, chanced a glance at the device she'd affixed to her console. Its screen remained blank. "Come on, people!" She slathered her face and head with pitch-black gel only slightly darker than her own skin. "If we're doing this, it has to be now. 7? What's that reading?" Yolanda 7's fingers flitted across her console. "Core is stable, and you're insane." "So noted. Frankie?" The teleporter tech looked up, her teeth clenched, her shaved brown scalp beaded with sweat. This close to the core, no amount of shielding could hold back all the heat. "We have teleporter lock. You really don't have to do this." "That's subjective." Webb hit her activator. The suit vacuum-sealed around her. "At least put your helmet on." Webb shook her head, clamped on some goggles. "Have to see what I'm doing." Though if this took more than a few seconds, no amount of gel would matter. +1 to your insanity." "Noted. Everyone behind the deadline." Red shirts glued themselves to the far wall or ducked behind heat shields. Webb made sure no one was in desiccation range, let out a long breath, and opened the core. Klaxons roared. Alarm lights painted engineering red. Emergency force fields sprung up to prevent the heat from the star, the living star compressed to the size of a basketball in the heart of the ship, from vaporizing the crew. The heat still hit Webb hard enough to curl her eyebrows. The superheated air would have baked organic lungs. She could feel the regulators in hers whir and spin to keep the air merely hellish. The gel on her face was already boiling off. The tip of her ear screamed where she'd missed a spot. Not much time now. In a few seconds, the temperature shield would fail, and the stellar radiation would dust them all across the ship. Webb hefted her pizza board. She slipped the frozen pizza onto the ceramic support ribs and the cooling tower and gave a thumbs up. Yolanda 7 hit a button. The core slammed shut. Webb yanked off the goggles. Her protective gel gone. She could barely see through the steam billowing off her suit. She could see well enough within the cooling tower the pizza had already begun to swell. 7 squinted at the drive core. "Is it supposed to cook so fast?" "Theoretically." Webb killed the alarm on her console. "There's not really regs for this. The Heartland crew estimated 15 seconds. "Cog!" came a yell from the hall. The red shirts exchanged a collective glance before bolting back to their workstations. Webb snatched up the device at her console. On its screen, a green dot was blinking right outside engineering. Lured. She looked at the cooling tower. The pizza had already swollen to the size of a beach ball. Lured! A door on the upper floor slid open with a pneumatic hiss. A cog marched in with mechanical precision, its stony white eyes peering down at them from a marble face. Webb and Frankie stood side by side to block its view of the pizza. "Which one is it?" Frankie whispered. "Security or engineering," said Webb. "If I had to guess based on the response time." "We detected a core breach," said the cog without inflection. "A minimal breach, sir," said Webb. "Barely registered, 3 seconds tops. No damage or leakage, all levels within acceptable parameters." "We detected no power surge." "There was none. Routine maintenance. Reset it myself." She indicated the pressure suit. The cog froze for a beat. Proximity to the core sometimes futzed with their data streams. "No maintenance was scheduled." "It just came up. Stabilization rib slipped out of alignment." "If containment is lost, the ship is lost," said the cog. "Containment was never at risk, sir." A wet pop from behind them. Webb looked up to see exploded pizza guts caramelizing in the cooling tower. The red shirts let out a disappointed sigh. "We've lost teleporter lock," reported Frankie. The cog stared at the containments. "Explain." Webb looked from the dead pizza to Frankie to the cog and rolled the dice. "Space bat." She could almost hear the processors catch behind the cog's Roman face. "Please repeat that statement." "Space bat." Webb ignored Frankie's huge-eyed stare. "Must have flown in through the vents." "No such creature exists." "New discovery," said Yolanda 7. "It just hit the journals." Webb nodded. "I'm sure the Xenobiocog knows. You should ask him. You want me to close the vents?" "We will remind the technicians that the Collective Operations Group functions as a single entity. Individual vessels carry no compartmentalized knowledge." "Thanks, Cog. We'd all forgotten." "There is a high probability your statement was sarcastic." Sight cog, Webb sent to Frankie. That's the one. See that chip in his hairline where Dalbert hit him with the table? Another hiss. In trundled Dewey, the chief engineer, her hair gray, her badge gold, her shirt as red as the rest of theirs. The cog spun her way. We responded to a suspicious minor core breach. There is a high probability one or more technicians inserted contraband into the drive core.
Jesus, teabagging shit blisters,
said the chief. The cog actually blinked. We recommend the cooling vents be sealed to prevent further spacebat incursion.
The fuck you talking about?
The cog went rigid again. In these paralytic moments, their resemblance to the classic statues they were modeled after, Roman busts on Greek bodies, was uncanny. As uncanny as the valley that made mistaking them for human impossible.
Hello?
Dewey knocked on its forehead, sighed, glared at Webb.
What have I said about screwing with the cogs?
Never unless it's necessary.
So, was it?
Subjectively so. Disregard previous statement, the cog said abruptly. We shall be making a full report.
And I'm certain the captain will read it.
Dewey squinted at the cog, pointed.
There's a crack there under your hairline. That's a distinguishing feature.
We shall have it repaired immediately. The cog's eyes went blank. Its head drooped, lolling limp as a blacked-out drunk, while its body walked out of engineering. The chief took the lift down. Red shirts parted around her as she approached the cooling tower. She looked up at the blackened remains of the pie. Her sigh could have filled a Zeppelin.
A fucking pizza, Webb?
A Mondo Supreme, said Webb. We were saving you a slice.
I don't even know what the code is for detonating contraband in the drive core. Harsh, I'm guessing. What's wrong with you?
Food pellets, Chief. They've had us on pellets since we ran out of meal creds last crunch.
God help you if you fab that.
Webb looked incredulous. Why would I fab a frozen pizza? Dewey eyed Frankie.
You've got a teleporter tech right here.
Frankie shrugged. I like pizza. No one's trying to get brigged here, Chief. Dewey grunted.
That better have been the only one.
The shift change peeled through engineering. Red shirts meandered off. A few cast longing looks back at the tower, including the chief.
I'll be on the bridge, she told him. Captain wants us up to oversee the bombardment. Now clean that lurd out of my core, or I'll make sure he does read the report.
You think you won't otherwise?
With that bit of alien strange on board, his only priority's making another, how'd you put it?
Diplomatic connection? Said Frankie. With his dick, Yolanda 7 clarified.
Thanks, Chevalier, said the chief.
Are they even compatible? Dewey scoffed.
Has that ever stopped him before?
From his panoramic cabin atop the starship Independence, Captain William Seagrave watched agrochem torpedoes streak into the atmosphere and detonate with ship-nudging force. Each burst blossomed into a swirling atmospheric storm, a tempest heaving with lightning and torrential rains. Beautiful. His companion regarded him curiously. You find beauty in destruction, Captain? I find beauty in life, Ambassador. He eyed her appreciatively. Among other things. She didn't catch the pass. No matter. Universal translation was still in its infancy, and according to the report, the Sorrel were especially difficult to read. They emoted not with their faces, but with their hair-like mane of feathers, like cats with their ears. The ambassador's feathers remained folded behind her back. He wasn't discouraged. If there was one thing he knew, one thing that didn't require computer-assisted translation, it was how to speak woman, even to waifish blue beauties like this one. He put on a smile, gazed up into her two big eyes, and pictured her naked.
You didn't answer my question, Captain.
It's not destruction. He walked to the window, looked out over the storms unwrapping the planet. It's development. A year from now, that planet, that dead, barren rock, will be supporting life, civilization.
And a year after that, you will have stripped it and abandoned it.
There's no stopping progress.
You take stars to power your ships.
He chuckled. The wonders of advancement.
You deprive entire systems of light and life. You consider that advancement.
Not intelligent life, he corrected her. Just bugs and algae. That got a ripple of feathers.
And forests.
We harvest the timber before we take the star. We're not monsters. He filled a pair of champagne flutes. To the fruits of our labor.
Our stomachs cannot metabolize alcohol.
He chuckled again. Touché. Another ripple.
I don't believe that translated.
Maybe not verbally. It was just a matter of time now. He ran a hand through his luxurious locks. Her eyes went to his hair.
There's a substantial amount of ointment in your keratin, Captain. Is it ill?
So, he downed both flutes. How can I convince you to include us in your little galactic union?
It's as we said in the communique. Was it not clear?
It's clear your organization doesn't think we're ready, that you're hostile to our expansion.
There is no hostile intent, Captain. We merely wish
You don't approve of what we're doing down there, developing our resources. If you decide we don't belong in your union, haven't you effectively chosen to compete with us? She spread her hands, an unpracticed gesture, one no doubt gotten from her own behavioral briefing.
There is no hostile intent, nor intent to offend. I am here merely as an amicable observer. I have been instructed to be accommodating in all ways.
Interesting. He licked the rim of his glass. Her feathers didn't move.
As was said in our communique, a sufficient level of technological advancement is not the sole criterion we consider.
Ah, he nodded. I see. You need an assessment of the human spirit.
That is not remotely correct. The concept is immeasurable.
Damn right it is.
He rose, tugged his violet uniform taut.
The human spirit is what carried us through wars and across oceans to carve nations out of the wilderness, to raise ourselves from savagery and climb to the heavens to write our names in the stars. You'll find no finer example of humanity than on this ship. Exemplars of the species, every one. He took her hand. All at my command. She blinked both sets of eyelids. The report said that was an indication of a heightened emotional state, clearly arousal. He caressed the back of her hand.
We began this discussion on beauty.
Surely that's as immeasurable as spirit. Yet you don't challenge me on its existence.
I did not.
Ambassador, would you care to join me on a trip through the immeasurable? He sat on his chaise before the stars, patted the cushions next to him. She sat. Her feathers stood up, and she looked a question at him when he slipped his arm around her waist. For stability, he told her. Indeed? A chime from the ceiling. Yes, Captain.
Take us into the atmosphere. Cruise pattern Seagrave Delta 1. Let's go sailing.
That will take us into the planet's gravity well, Captain.
Well, yes, that's entirely the point. The ship chimed compliance. Ahead, the planet rose and slinked towards them. As smoothly as slipping into a pool, they slid into the top layer of the stratosphere. A bump, and the air ignited all around them.
Great curling sheets of fire peeled away around the windows like burning fronds.
Seagrave glanced at the ambassador. Her feathers stood up in an Elizabethan frill. He indulged in an inward scoff. Xenobiology had been so insistent he read the entire report, as if he required instruction in a language he spoke fluently. He leaned towards the ambassador. She languidly turned his way.
Her frill dropped when his badge chimed.
She turned back to the windows. The captain mashed his badge. What?
Sir,
Said some crewman.
we've got a torpedo lodged in a starboard tube. It's keeping the port from closing and we can't fire an atmo. So we need to pull out or evacuate the...
Then evac.
But sir, if the torpedo over...
He clicked off his badge and readjusted the smile. No. Where were we? Webb and Frankie waded through a corridor choked with red shirts to slip into their quad. Judging by the sounds coming from behind her bunk panel, Chelsea and her husband were taking advantage of the shift change, and judging by the sudden silence, they hadn't been expecting company.
Don't mind us.
Webb pulled a couple of fine-geared instruments from her locker.
Won't be more than a sec, though I suspect you're used to hearing that, Chels. Choke on a spanner, techie.
The sound of bunking resumed. Ah, the things you could get used to living on top of each other. Webb sat on her bunk, pulled out her device from engineering. A half-dozen blips registered in its screen. Huh. Seems to be working now. Frankie seated herself up in the full lotus and closed her eyes.
Any guess why it didn't pick him up?
They may have changed frequencies, or just stopped talking. I can only pick them up if they're interacting. Frankie slowed her breathing.
Any more of that pizza in your locker?
Webb narrowed her eyes. Aren't you supposed to not want anything? As Siddhartha himself once sagely observed, pizza is pizza. So how about it? Like I'm gonna keep contraband in my locker when we quad with a cop. I'm right here, you know, said Chels. I can hear you. And we could hear you, said Webb. Both of you. From the hall, added Frankie. Chelsea's bunk fell quiet. Rob's not here. Oh? Webb picked up half a uniform. Then whose pants are these? Seven's, said Chels. Mine, admitted Rob. Chels sighed. God damn it, Robbie. There's such balance in nature, said Webb. You let me do my side projects. I keep quiet about all the times you break visitation. Whatever, said Chels. Don't touch my guns. Webb saluted her bunk, went back to fiddling with her cog finder. If I could figure out how to track them when they're quiet, then I'd have something. Something worth fabbing? Frankie mused. Are you trying to get me brigged? Webb tossed the device in her bunk, climbed up to flop on the mattress, and rubbed the double shift off her face. The quad fell silent, apart from the bunking.
What do you think the chances are the captain's exploring a new frontier right now?
Frankie asked. Even odds? It seems like it should be impossible, doesn't it? All the aliens we've met looking pretty much like us, just with slightly different foreheads. You're meditating rather loudly today. I mean, what are the chances that every intelligent starfaring people we'd encounter would be... How to put it? Webb eyed Chelsea's panel. Bunkable? Right! You'd think the infinite vastness of space would have produced more than one basic body type. Never gave it much thought, really.
Ideal form theory, said Rob. Advanced evolutionary convergence, like how seals and sea lions have the same basic body shape but evolved from completely different ancestors. Every environment has a form that's ideal for it, right? And steers evolution in that direction. For space, that form appears to be bipedal humanoid toolmaker.
Honey, said Chels.
Shut up. Sorry, it's kind of a hobby. The probability of it's like astronomically against, but that's just one theory.
Rob, said Webb.
Shut up. One of the more compelling counter-arguments is that there are way more forms out there, incalculably more. But we've only seen aliens who look like us because psychologically they're easier for us to accept, and they've been sent here to help ease us into...
Frankie tapped her comm badge.
Fuller to Alameda.
I think your wife was looking for you. A thump against the panel. The sound of a struggle. Rob squealed indignantly. That was mean, Webb told Frankie. Can't hear you, said Frankie. Inner peace.
Charles!
Rob's voice was strained.
What are you?
Nurse, you're out of uniform. That's a Class 2 violation.
I can't move.
I'm going to need you to come with me.
Oh.
Rob lowered his voice, added a dash of syrup.
What are you gonna do to me, officer?
I think I'm going to have to take you in.
Oh my God,
Webb glared at Frankie. Look what you've done. A half smile. Webb bounced her cog finder off the panel. Keep your stupid sex games to yourself. Get promoted and you won't have to hear 'em, said Chels. That's a burn, said Frankie. Also, An explosion rocked the ship, sending Rob and Chels tumbling out of her bunk. Klaxon screamed in the sudden red light.
Red alert, the Independent said without passion. All crew to crisis stations. Rob held up his wrists. Untie me first?
The captain strode onto the bridge. Situation report. Explosion in the starboard torpedo bay, said Security Chief Sivos. Severe structural damage. We're shedding heat tiles left and right. The ambassador's eyes were locked on the ribbons of fire racing over the bridge. Seagrave grimaced. This was killing the mood. Emergency shields. Up, but ineffective.
The damage exceeds their dimensions,
Dewey called from the engineering station.
They're stretched too far. We need to get back to orbit or we lose the whole battery.
Reddening, the captain gritted his teeth. Heads would roll for this. He smiled an apology to the ambassador. Take us out of Atmo and find out who's responsible. Aye, sir, said the helm. The ship turned for the cold darkness of space. Then a thump, a shudder like the cracking of a suspension bridge, and the lights went out. Shit, said the helm. Warning, main power offline, said the ship. Space dropped from view. In its place swirled crackling, terraforming storms. The ship dipped towards the atmosphere at a dangerous angle.
Uncontrolled descent,
Reported the ship.
critical failure in 90 seconds.
Barbara, get me power!
He shouted at the chief. Dewey mashed her comm badge.
Talk to me, Webb!
To prevent damage to the star drive, all consoles in engineering were rigged to blow away from the drive core, which they tended to do with alarming frequency and little provocation. When the ship was in actual danger, they popped off like fireworks. A pair of red shirts with extinguisher packs hosed down the sparking slag of Webb's console. Drive core is offline, she calmed the chief. We're on emergency power.
I can see that. What's with the main?
Initial explosion took out a conduit. Main went off like it's supposed to, but the breakers blew on restart.
Reboot shouldn't have fried the breakers.
Well, no, but the sequence wasn't spec'd for Atmo during an electrical storm. Webb yanked the radiation shield off the backup console. The hell are we doing in the stratosphere?
Focus, Webb.
Yeah. Webb punched a few buttons. The readings made her flinch.
Lord.
7, can you confirm what I'm seeing? Hang on, my console melted. Yolanda 7 peeled a panel off the wall behind her burning station. Behind it buzzed a swarm of angry lights. She whistled. Yeah, that's a lurd. Barbara, where's my power? It's here, Captain, said Webb. We just can't get it to you. Conduits from engineering are burnt out.
How many?
Asked the chief. How many? Echoed Webb. One of them? 7 picked her way over and through the wreckage, scanning. All of them? Hard to tell with no console. Focus! Options! Get lucky and repair the right conduit, said Webb. Or the ship lurched. Red shirts hit the floor like bowling pins. Bunk this! Webb tapped her badge. Weber to Seagrave. Captain, recommend we abandon ship. Denied with prejudice.
Forget the conduits.
The chief's voice was tinny. The storms were interfering with the comms.
Patch power directly into propulsion from the main vein.
Yolanda 7, the senior electrical technician, went pale as chalk. Webb lowered her voice. Chief, whoever does that's getting fried.
Only if you send in a body, leadhead. Jesus, fuck!
Webb snapped her fingers, checked the cog finder hanging from her belt. Her grin split her face. Captain, there's a cog right outside engineering. Don't ask how I know. Permission to send him in for repairs. Denied. Cogs are too sensitive. He means expensive, said 7. But Captain, warning, said the ship. Critical failure in 30 seconds. Captain. Webb didn't recognize the voice that cut in, but he sounded young and sure of himself, clearly an officer. A direct patch from the main power vein to propulsion would give us the power to clear Atmo. We could complete the repairs in orbit. Tremendous, said the captain. Proceed. 7's eyes went wide as saucers. They heard the chief's badge engage.
Chevalier,
She sounded defeated.
grab a cutter and some tri-wire.
Oh, God,
Said 7.
Make the patch.
7 whimpered. Webb hit her badge. Weber to Fuller. I'm here, said Frankie. Get me a Pry 1 lock on 7's badge. You may have to teep her out of a conduit. Copy. Some clicking. Lock set. Yolanda 7 numbly looped a length of tri-wire around her torso. Webb took her by the shoulders. You can do this. Her gaze went distant. I was going to call my mom tonight. Look at me. This is routine. You've got this. We had some good times, didn't we? Her eyes swam. I almost made the full 6. Knock that shit off. Frankie's got you. You'll be fine. Webb forced a smile. Now, go save the ship. With a nod and a sigh, Yolanda 7 wriggled into a crawl space. Webb's heart tried to claw its way out of her chest to follow. Terraforming storms bathed the bridge in hot electric light. Not even the advanced stabilizers could keep the section from shaking. Officers exchanged worried glances and looked to their captain for deliverance. Seagrave glanced to the lantern-jawed officer whose suggestion might just save his ship. Better hope you're right, Lieutenant. He'd also better hope this didn't damage his chances with the ambassador. She'd braced herself on his command chair and was blinking every eyelid she had, her frill of feathers at full peacock. Good. The threat of imminent death was a powerful aphrodisiac. I'm there, a technician said over the comms. Patching in now. Critical failure in 15 seconds, said the ship. The ship shuddered. So did the captain's gut. Both glasses of bubbly had been a mistake. You have 10 seconds, technician. More than I need. She didn't sound convinced. A whir and a puncturing clamp.
Patch complete!
Dewey relaxed her death grip on the rail.
Get out of there, girl!
Critical failure in 10 seconds.
Backing out now.
Explosive lightning pulled the captain's eyes to the storm. Those cells were close. Too close. His stomach lurched.
9.
Captain. The lieutenant indicated the storms with his eyes. The captain's stomach did a somersault. He clamped a hand on his gut.
8.
Screw this. No way he was puking in front of his conquest. The captain nodded at the lieutenant. Dewey saw it. She straightened in alarm.
Captain!
Almost there,
said 7. The captain set his jaw. Energize. The core lit up like a magnesium flare, sending trillions of zettajoules of stellar power coursing through the ship, and a plume of raw plasma sparking out of the crawl space. Webb's breath deserted her. It took 2 tries to hit her badge hard enough to engage.
Frankie!
Her mouth had gone dry.
Tell me you got her!
The line was quiet. Frankie choked out a sob. Webb's heart fell.
No. The storm, it broke the lock.
Frankie was barely audible.
10 seconds. He gave her 10 seconds.
Webb covered her face, sank to the floor, pressed her hands over her ears to drown out the cheering over the comms. On the bridge, officers whooped and hollered as the ship pulled safely back into orbit. Hand raised, the captain acknowledged the praise. He pointed to the young lieutenant, Blackwell. That was his name. He'd remember him. Seagrave motioned for silence. He turned to the ambassador. There. Human spirit, on full display. Crisis leading to innovation, leading to success. You just saw who we are.
Indeed, I did.
She blinked both sets of eyelids. The captain seized her, dipped her, and kissed her right there on the bridge. The officers cheered anew. Caught off guard by the mating display, and not wishing to appear rude, the ambassador deposited a clutch of eggs in the captain's stomach.